Vintage EMD Streamliner and Alco Branchliner Power took on a trip across South Australia, with the AK inspection cars in tow, recording, testing and inspecting all crossing loops along its route across a 3-day trip. Southern Short Haul Railroad hauls the train and, as always, puts on a show, with 2 legendary locomotives designed in the 1950s and built in the early 60s. They are EMD Streamliner GM22 and Alco Branchliner 4829, which work a round trip to and from the eastern states, entering South Australia via the Melbourne to Adelaide line, working through the Adelaide Hills into Adelaide, then into the mid-north to Crystal Brook, and heading back east via the Broken Hill line. Streamliner GM22 was the first GM built after a 5-year gap, entering service in July 1962, working for the Commonwealth Railways and Australian National until 1994 when it was stored. The locomotive re-entered service in 1998 with Great Northern, before transferring to CFCLA in 2002 and eventually its current owners, Southern Short Haul Railroad. Brachliner Alco 4829 entered service a year earlier than the GM, in May 1961, operating for the New South Wales Department of Railways. It was eventually sold to the Silverton Tramway and renumbered 48S33, before being renumbered back to 4829 by Southern Short Haul Railroad. The train is currently seen at Jamestown, about 250 kilometres from Adelaide. But rewind the clock 24 hours and we find ourselves about 300 kilometres to the south, on the other side of Adelaide at Murray Bridge, prior to our chase of the service across the state. The rail bridge across the River Murray turns 100 this year, with the vintage engines on approach about to create a rather rare sight. Now amongst the Adelaide Hills, the chase continues, with the train seen just outside of Callington at the Callington Curve, with the engines working up a 1 in 43 grade through the curve in windy conditions. After pausing on the loop at Ambleside for about half an hour for a cross, the vintage engines get away, working up a 1 in 48 grade on departure. After a break overnight in Adelaide, the AK inspection cars got away early, and we catch them about 200 kilometres north of the capital at the Huddleston Curves, at the start of the Crystal Brook to Broken Hill line. The two classic engines make for a special sight, with the 1 in 81 climb getting the engines to make some noise as they begin their run along the line. As mentioned earlier, the AK inspection cars have been running via each crossing loop, making for a slow trip across the state, especially along the Broken Hill line, where the points have to be manually changed. Just east of Caltowie, the train can be seen exiting the loop and powering back up to track speed. At Jamestown, 250 kilometres north of Adelaide, the run through the crossing loop is rather strange, with the original crossing loop out of use and the good siding now used for the crossing of trains instead. The loop here has always been rather short at a little over 1,000 metres, making crosses here rather rare, but track recording of the old under-maintained siding is still required, with this likely the first use of the track in many months.